"I know your secret," Mafia boss whispered. As he undressed the crying girl in his bed, Elira Dawn moved through the Vescari penthouse like a ghost. It was a skill she had perfected over 10 years of running, how to be invisible, how to occupy space without leaving a trace. She was a housekeeper, one of 4 who serviced the sprawling apartment high above the rain-slicked streets of Eastbourne. But she was the only one trusted with the master suite. Trusted in this world meant she was too quiet to be a threat and too plain to be a temptation. Tonight, that trust was broken. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, hours past her shift. The penthouse was silent, a fortress of glass and steel that hummed with a low, oppressive energy. She should have been in her small staff room in the basement instead. She was here, in his bedroom, huddled on the floor by the foot of his enormous, unmade bed. She was crying, and she was not doing it quietly. The sobs were ragged, torn from her throat with a violence that frightened her. She pressed her face into the thick, dark gray carpet, trying to muffle the sound. The room smelled of him. Not cheap cologne, but something expensive and subtle, like sandalwood, leather, and the clean, metallic scent of the city air. She had come here to finish the turn-down service she had fled hours earlier, only to find the memory of what happened waiting for her. Russo, one of the new bodyguards, had been waiting in the hall. He was built like a refrigerator, with small, assessing eyes that had lingered on her for weeks. Tonight, he had decided to stop looking and start touching. He had backed her against the wall by the linen closet, his voice a low, wet rumble, suggesting things she could do to make her job easier. She had frozen, the old, cold terror filling her veins, but when he'd grabbed her wrist, hard, something in her had snapped. She hadn't screamed. She had driven her knee upward, catching him in the soft part of his thigh, just hard enough to make him grunt and release her. She had fled, locking herself in a staff bathroom until her hands stopped shaking. Now, hours later, the adrenaline was gone, leaving only the crushing weight of her reality. The bruise on her wrist was already darkening. She was trapped. She had run from monsters her whole life, only to land in a den managed by the worst of them all. She cried for her father, for her brother, and for the hopeless, stupid lie her life had become. A soft chime cut through her grief. The private elevator. Elira's breath hitched, her heart hammered against her ribs. He never came home this late. He was supposed to be in Chicago. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her face frantically with the sleeve of her gray uniform. She looked at the bed, the pillows still mussed from where she'd buried her face in them moments before. She was trapped. There was no connecting door, no balcony, only the single entrance from his private hall. The elevator doors slid open. She flattened herself against the far wall behind a tall, dark oak dresser, praying the shadows would hide her. She heard his footsteps, measured and silent on the marble of the foyer. He wasn't walking like a man who was tired or drunk. He was walking like a predator. Dario Vescari stopped in the bedroom doorway. He didn't turn on the lights. The room was illuminated only by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering, indifferent city below. He stood there for a full 30 seconds, a tall silhouette in a perfectly tailored suit. He was stillness personified. Elira held her breath until her lungs burned. Slowly, he turned his head, his gaze cutting directly through the shadows to where she stood, trembling. He had known she was there. He had probably known the second the elevator doors opened. "Mr. Vescari," she whispered, her voice wrecked. "I'm so sorry. I was just finishing." He ignored the lie. He took off his suit jacket, folding it meticulously over the back of a chair. He loosened his tie. He moved not with anger, but with a terrifying, deliberate calm. He walked toward her, and she squeezed her eyes shut. A fresh wave of tears leaking out. This was it. This was how it ended. Harassing a guard was one thing. Being caught hiding in the boss's bedroom was a death sentence. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Why are you crying?" His voice was low, a rough gravel that seemed to vibrate in the air. It wasn't the question she expected. She expected yelling, accusations. She opened her eyes. His face was hard, all sharp angles and shadows, but his dark eyes were clear and assessing. He wasn't angry. He was curious. She couldn't form a sentence. She just shook her head, pressing herself harder against the wall. "You're trespassing," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "And you're crying on my floor. I want to know why." He reached out, not to hit her, but to turn on the small, dim lamp on the dresser beside her. The warm, low light illuminated her tear-streaked face. His gaze dropped, fastening on her left arm. She had pulled her sleeve down, but not fast enough. He didn't ask. He simply reached out, his fingers closing gently but firmly around her wrist. She flinched at the contact, the skin already tender. With his thumb, he pushed the sleeve of her uniform tunic up, revealing the dark, mottled purple of a fresh, hand-shaped bruise. He stared at it. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. "Who?" he asked. Just one word. The truth died on her lips. She couldn't be the rat. She couldn't be the girl who caused trouble, who got a man like Russo, a made man, she suspected, in trouble. That was a direct path to a shallow grave. "Nobody," she lied, pulling her arm from his grasp. "I tripped. I fell on the service stairs. I'm clumsy." Dario Vescari looked at her face for a long time. He saw the lie settle in her eyes. He knew his service stairs were carpeted in thick wool. He glanced back at the bruise, at the clear imprints of 4 fingers and a thumb. He didn't believe her. He didn't say another word. "Go to your room, Elira," he said, his voice flat. He had never used her name before. "Do not come back up here tonight." She didn't need to be told twice. She bolted, running past him through the foyer and out the service door, not stopping until she was behind the flimsy lock of her basement room. The next morning, she packed her small duffel bag, expecting a knock from security. Instead, the head housekeeper, Mrs. Petrov, arrived at 7 o'clock, her face pale. "Mr. Vescari has had you reassigned," she said, her voice tight. "Fired," Elira whispered, her stomach sinking. "No, you're being moved." She wasn't moved out, she was moved up, to a guest suite on the sub-penthouse level, 2 floors below Dario's. It was a beautiful room, 3 times the size of her staff quarters, with its own bathroom and a view of the river. It was also a cage. The elevator required a key card, and she was informed she would now be servicing only this floor in Mr. Vescari's private level. She didn't see Russo that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, she heard 2 of the other maids whispering by the laundry. Russo was gone, not transferred, not on vacation, gone. One of them had heard he'd been taken to a warehouse out by the docks. He had broken a house rule. Elira felt sick. Dario hadn't believed her lie, and with the quiet, deadly efficiency of a king, he had removed the piece from the board. From that day on, she felt his eyes on her. Dario Vescari began observing her. He was a man who thrived on information, who saw the world as a complex map of threats and assets. This girl, Elira, had just become an anomaly, and he did not tolerate anomalies. She was quiet, yes, but it was not the quiet of a simple or dull-witted person. It was the quiet of a watcher. He watched her on the security feeds. She never idled. She never gossiped. She cleaned with a methodical, almost obsessive precision, but her eyes were always moving. She clocked the bodyguards. She knew where the cameras were, the hidden ones, too. She noted the exits. She was smart. One afternoon, he found a paperback tucked into her cleaning cart, hidden beneath a stack of fresh towels. It was a worn copy of the Brothers Karamazov, not typical reading for his staff, and she was alert. A drop tray in the kitchen made the other staff jump. It made Elira flinch, her body instantly coiling, her hand grabbing the edge of the counter as if preparing to vault it. She was not a maid. She was hiding, and Dario Vescari intended to find out why. Elira felt the shift. The invisible protection was as heavy as a threat. The other guards left her alone, but they watched her. She was now, somehow, his. She had to warn Milo. She waited until she was sure the floor was empty, then slipped into a vast walk-in linen closet, the smell of lavender and bleach surrounding her. She pulled out the burner phone she kept taped beneath the lowest shelf. It had only one number. It rang 3 times before he picked up. "Yeah?" His voice was young, cautious. "Milo, it's me. Elle, are you okay? You're not supposed to call this week." "I'm fine," she lied. "I'm fine. I need you to be smart. Stay low. Are you still at the garage?" "Yeah, boss is good. I'm learning the inventory. It's fine. Don't talk to anyone new. Don't tell anyone about Dad, about anything. Do you understand me? Elle, you're scaring me." "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said, squeezing the phone. "Nothing is wrong. I just have a feeling. I need you to be safe. I love you. I have to go." She hung up before he could reply, powered down the phone, and put it back in its hiding place. She leaned her head against the rough cotton of the towels, her heart aching. She was so tired of being scared. That night, she was exhausted. She fell asleep in her new, luxurious room before 10 o'clock, forgetting to double-check the lock. The door, heavy and solid, didn't click fully into the jamb. It was open just a crack. Dario found it at midnight. He was walking the hall, restless, his mind grinding on a problem with his shipping manifests. He saw the sliver of light from her room, a breach in his security. He pushed the door. It swung open silently. She was asleep, tangled in the white sheets, her breathing deep and even. He stood in the doorway, just watching her. In sleep, the fear was gone from her face. She looked younger. She looked like the girl she was supposed to be. She was lying on her stomach, her face turned toward him. The thin strap of her simple cotton pajama top had slipped down her left arm, exposing her shoulder blade and the tattoo. It was small, no bigger than a quarter, and faded. But he knew the design, a stylized, minimalist shield with a single, balanced scale inside. Dario felt the air leave his lungs. It was not a shock, it was a click. The final, heavy piece of a puzzle sliding into place. He had seen that symbol before. 10 years ago, he'd seen it on a business card, on a lapel pin, on the file that had sent his father to a federal prison for the rest of his life, the personal insignia of federal prosecutor William Dawn. He looked at the sleeping girl, Elira Dawn. He walked into the room, his movements still silent. He stood over her, looking down at the mark that was her father's, and by extension, her own. The daughter of the man who had ruined his family, working as a maid in his house, hiding in plain sight. He reached down and placed his hand on her bare shoulder, his fingers brushing the tattoo. She woke instantly, a sharp, terrified intake of breath. She tried to bolt upright, but his hand was firm, holding her in place. "I know your secret," he whispered. The color drained from her face. She went utterly, deathly pale. This was not the flinch of a startled maid. This was the primal terror of a cornered animal. "Please," she gasped, scrambling backward, pulling the sheet up to her chin, her eyes wide and frantic. "Please, I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop," he said. His voice was not hard, but it carried an authority that cut off her words. "The lies are done." He sat on the edge of the bed, a dangerous weight that made the mattress dip. She pressed herself against the headboard, shaking so hard the wood rattled. "Sit up," he said. She did, pulling the sheet tight. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Who are you? Why are you here?" "I'm Elira. I work for you. Your name is Elira Dawn," he stated. Her composure shattered. A low, terrible sound came from her throat, a sob of pure, undiluted horror. She knew that name, spoken in this house, was her execution. "My family," she finally choked out, the words ripped from her. "My family was targeted years ago. My father. He made enemies. They killed him. We ran. I just needed a place to hide, a place no one would ever think to look." She was breaking down, the years of suppressed grief and fear pouring out of her, the story of her life, a tragedy written by men exactly like him. She was sobbing, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. He watched her. This was the daughter of his enemy. She was the last living piece of a war that had cost him everything. He should have felt rage. He should have felt triumph. He felt tired. This raw, broken thing in front of him was not an enemy. She was a casualty. Slowly, as if moving through water, he lifted his hand. She flinched as he moved toward her face. He paused, letting her see he meant no harm, before continuing. He cupped her cheek, his thumb calloused and rough as it wiped a tear from her skin. She stopped crying, her breath catching. Her wide, tear-filled eyes stared at him, full of confusion and terror. "You're not alone anymore," he said, the words coming from a place inside him he hadn't known existed. The air in the room changed. The distance between them collapsed, filled with the sudden, sharp charge of something new. He looked at her, truly looked at her, at the trembling mouth, the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion that clung to her like a shroud. She was still hiding, still trapped in the uniform of a life that wasn't hers. He made a decision. He kissed her forehead, a soft, brief pressure of his lips against her skin. It was a benediction, a promise. She shuddered at the contact but didn't pull away. "Let me," he whispered, his voice a low rasp. His other hand moved to the simple buttons of her pajama top. She froze, her eyes searching his, looking for the predator, but his gaze was steady, gentle. He undid the first button. His fingers brushed the warm skin of her collarbone. He was slow, deliberate. He was not taking. He was unburdening. He was undressing the ghost, the maid, the lie. He undid the second button and the third. His movements were protective. He was revealing the woman who had been hiding underneath, the woman whose secret he now held. He slid the cotton fabric off her shoulders. She didn't resist. She sat perfectly still, breathing in shallow, shaky gasps, watching him as if he were diffusing a bomb. He eased the shirt down her arms, letting it fall into her lap. He didn't stare at her body, though she was beautiful in the dim light. He kept his eyes on her face, watching the fear slowly recede, replaced by a stunned, fragile vulnerability. He eased her back against the pillows, his hand supporting her head. Then, he took the edge of the heavy sheet and pulled it up, covering her completely, tucking it gently under her chin. He had undressed her only to cover her. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the girl in his bed. The war was over, and something new, something far more dangerous, had just begun. Elira woke slowly, then all at once, the light was wrong. It was the color of steel, the gray, early morning light of Eastbourne, and it was filtering through windows that were not her own. The sheets were a thread count she had only ever laundered, never slept in. They were dark gray and smelled of sandalwood and leather. She was in his bed, Dario Viscari's. She bolted upright, her heart leaping into her throat. The pajama top he had unbuttoned was still loose, and she fumbled to pull it closed. The vast bed was empty, but the pillow beside her held the faint indentation of a head. The night returned in a flood, his hand on her tattoo, his voice. "I know your secret." The confession, her breakdown, and then the terrifying, confusing intimacy, his hands on her, gentle. His kiss on her forehead. She had fallen asleep while he was, what? Watching her? She searched her body, her mind, for any sign of violation. There was nothing. Just a profound, aching exhaustion, and the memory of his hand cupping her cheek. He hadn't touched her. He had simply held her. A heavy, warm presence in the dark until her sobs had finally quieted into sleep. The anxiety was so sharp it tasted like metal. He hadn't hurt her. That was the most terrifying part of all. A monster she understood. A man who could gently undress a crying girl whose father he should have hated, and then simply hold her? That was a language she did not speak. The door to the bedroom opened, and she flinched, pulling the heavy duvet up to her chin. Dario stood there. He was already dressed in a dark, perfectly fitted suit, a white shirt open at the collar. He looked as if he had been up for hours. He held a cup of coffee, and his face was unreadable. "Get dressed," he said, his voice the same low gravel as the night before. "We are making changes." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and left, the scent of coffee lingering in the air. Within an hour, the penthouse was a hive of quiet, anxious activity. Dario had ordered the house cleared. Mrs. Petrov and the other two maids were summoned, given severance packages that were obscene in their generosity, and dismissed. They looked at Elira with a mixture of fear and confusion as they were escorted out. She was the only one left. "You are no longer staff," Dario told her, standing by the vast windows, looking down at the city. "What am I?" she whispered, her hands clenched at her sides. "You are a problem," he said, without turning, "and I handle my problems personally." He was keeping her close, not in the guest suite, but in a room on his private floor, adjacent to his own. He called it safety. Elira knew it was a cage, a much more comfortable, expensive cage, but a cage nonetheless. Later that day, he introduced her to Gia. The woman was tall, with dark hair pulled into a severe knot and eyes that saw everything. She wore a sharp blazer and moved with a fluid, disciplined grace. "Gia will be your personal security," Dario said. "My security?" Elira looked at him. "You mean my guard?" Gia's face remained impassive. "It is a pleasure, Miss Dawn." The name, spoken aloud in this house, still made Elira sick. "Gia stays with you," Dario continued, as if Elira hadn't spoken. "When you are in this room, she is outside the door. When you leave this room, she is beside you. You do not go anywhere without her. Is that understood?" "You're my prisoner," Elira stated, the words flat and dead. Dario finally turned to look at her. His dark eyes were intense. "The people my father knew, the people who hated yours, they are still out there. If they find out who you are, what happened to Russo will look like a kindness. You are not my prisoner, Elira. You are a ghost, and I am the only one who can see you." While Elira chafed in her new prison, Dario worked. He sat in his glass-walled office, the penthouse silent save for the hum of the air system. He made 2 phone calls. He spoke in Italian, his voice calm and lethal. By mid-afternoon, the full report was on his encrypted terminal. He'd been right. It was all there. William Dawn, the relentless federal prosecutor, the man who had built a RICO case that had systematically dismantled the Vescari Empire, culminating in his father's life sentence. A sentence that had ended, 6 months later, with a shiv in the prison yard. Dario stared at the prosecutor's grainy photo, and beside it, a family picture from a newspaper article 10 years old. William Dawn, his arm around a son, Milo, and a daughter, Elira, a girl with the same wide, haunted eyes as the one sleeping in his house. The article detailed the aftermath: William Dawn's suspicious car accident, the subsequent disappearance of his children, presumed to be in witness protection. Dario had ruined his father's organization, and Dario's father had almost certainly orphaned her. The scales were balanced in blood. He closed the file. The girl wasn't just a threat. She was the living, breathing legacy of his family's destruction. That night, she found the courage. She had been pacing her new room for hours, watched by the silent, relentless Gia. She felt like a trapped animal. She had to know, she had to face him. She found him in the main living area, a cavernous space with a fireplace that wasn't lit. He was pouring a whiskey. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaking. Gia stood, ramrod straight, 10 feet behind her in the doorway. Dario turned, his expression neutral. "Tell Gia to wait. Gia, please wait outside." The bodyguard nodded once and stepped back, pulling the door almost closed. Elira took a breath. "You know my name? You know my father?" "What are you going to do to me?" He took a sip of his whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. "What do you expect me to do? I don't know. Kill me? Let me go? Ransom me?" She was rambling, the fear making her frantic. "I've been running for 10 years. I'm tired. I just need to know. My real name is Elira Dawn. My father was William Dawn. He put your father in prison." There. It was said. The full confession. She braced herself, her body tensing, waiting for the explosion. Dario was silent for a long moment. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. You know? I've known since yesterday. I confirmed it this afternoon." "Then why am I still here?" she cried, the frustration and terror boiling over. Why would you touch me? Why would you protect me? He was your enemy. I am your enemy." "My father was a monster," Dario said, his voice flat, "and yours was a zealot. They destroyed each other. That was their war. Illyra, not ours." She stared at him, stunned into silence. "You don't want revenge?" "Revenge?" He gave a short, harsh laugh. "Revenge is for fools who think it will bring back what they lost. My father is dead. Yours is dead. All that's left is us." He gestured between them. The fallout. The tension in the room was so thick she could barely breathe. It was shifting from fear to something else, something charged and dangerous. He invited her to dinner that night. Not in the formal dining room, but at a small, round table in his private study, a room lined with old books and dark wood. Gia stood outside. It was not a date. It was a parley. For the first hour, they ate in silence. He was, she had to admit, a gentleman. He served her wine. He asked her if the food was good. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. Finally, she put her fork down. "Why are you doing this?" "I am curious," he said. "About what?" "About you. About the daughter of a man who dedicated his life to justice, who ended up hiding as a maid for the man he tried to destroy." "My father believed in the law," she said, her voice sharp. "My father believed in family," he countered. "The law is just a set of rules written by the winners. Your father used those rules to tear my family apart. He called it justice. I called it a vendetta. Your father had people killed, and your father, in his justice, got men killed," Dario shot back, his voice dropping. "He used informants and then let them be slaughtered when they were no longer useful. He was no saint." They were glaring at each other across the table. The air was electric. This was not the quiet, terrified maid. This was Illyra Dawn, and he was seeing her for the first time. "I spent my entire life looking over my shoulder," she said, her voice breaking, the anger fading into the old, familiar pain. "After he died, we ran. We had no one. The law he believed in, it vanished. No one protected us. I've been hiding for 10 years. I've changed my name 6 times. I don't even know who Illyra Dawn is anymore." He watched her, his expression softening. The argument had broken something open in both of them. "I know," he said quietly. "How could you know?" "Because I've been hiding, too," he said. He leaned forward, his forearms on the table. "I was 16 when your father sent mine away. I had to become this." He gestured to the room, the penthouse, himself. "I had to become the man who could hold this family together. I did things. I buried things." He looked down at his glass. "Your father's death, the car accident, it wasn't an accident." "I know," she whispered. "My father," Dario said, his voice barely audible. "He was in prison, but his reach was still long. I believe he gave the order. I could have stopped it. I had heard whispers, but I was so full of rage. I did nothing. I let it happen." He looked up, and his eyes were dark with a guilt she recognized. It was the same guilt she felt for leaving her brother behind. "I am just as responsible for your father's death as he was," Dario said. The confession hung in the air between them. He had just handed her a weapon that could destroy him. The silence stretched, filled only by their breathing. He was closer now, though he hadn't moved from his chair. The table between them felt small. He stood, and she flinched. He walked around the table and stopped in front of her. She was still seated, forced to look up at him. He didn't loom over her. He crouched, bringing his face level with hers. "You are safe here, Illyra," he said, his voice a low, rough promise. "No one will ever hunt you again." She stared at him, at the sincerity in his dark eyes. He was the son of her father's killer, and he was the only person in 10 years who had made her feel anything other than terrified. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. He cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing over the pulse that hammered in her throat. "Dario," she breathed, her voice a warning, to him or to herself. She didn't know. He leaned in and kissed her. It was slow, intentional. It was not a kiss of passion, Not at first. It was a kiss of sealing. It was the taste of whiskey and guilt and a shared bloody history. His lips were firm and impossibly gentle. But the moment it settled, it changed. The shared breath, the proximity, the raw emotion of their confessions, it all caught fire. The gentleness hardened into need. His other hand came up, sliding into her hair, his fingers gripping the back of her neck, holding her steady. It was not a violent grip. It was possessive. It was an anchor. His mouth moved on hers, demanding a response, and she gave it, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. The kiss deepened, turning heated and desperate. He wasn't holding back entirely, but she could feel the restraint in his touch, a coiled power that he was deliberately keeping leashed. It was more intoxicating than any brute force. She was the one who pulled away. Elira gasped, her chest heaving, her lips stinging. She was breathless and suddenly, profoundly, afraid. This was dangerous. Falling for this man, the one man she should despise, was a fall she would not survive. I can't, she whispered, turning her face away. Dario didn't release her. His hand remained on her neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin just below her ear. He rested his forehead against her temple. I won't force anything, he promised, his voice thick. Ever. But do not lie to me, Elira. And do not lie to yourself. He let her go and stood. Go to bed. Gia will be outside. That night, she dreamed. She was back in the car. The rain was hammering on the roof, a deafening drum. She was in the back seat, Milo beside her. Her father was driving, then the truck, its headlights like angry, blind eyes smashing into their side, the sound of metal screaming, the world turning upside down. She dreamed of her father's hand, hanging limply, his eyes open and staring at nothing. She woke up screaming, a raw, throat-tearing sound that echoed in the silent, luxurious room. Her door burst open, slamming against the wall. Dario was there, framed in the hallway light. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, his feet bare. He held a gun, his arm tensed, his eyes wild and scanning the room for a threat. He saw her, huddled on the bed, shaking, her face wet with tears. The gun was lowered, in 2 strides. He was on the bed, pulling her against him. You're safe, he said, his voice rough with sleep and adrenaline. It was a dream. You're safe. She clutched him, her fingers digging into the hard muscle of his arms, burying her face in his chest. She was shaking violently. The images from the dream burned into her mind. He was solid, warm, and real. He was the enemy, the confessor, the protector. He held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist, holding her tight against him. He just held her, rocking her gently as her sobs subsided into shudders. They sat in the silence for a long time, the only sound the distant, constant hum of the city far below. Finally, when her breathing was almost even, he leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. I'm going to protect you, he whispered, his voice a vow in the darkness, even from the truth. Dario Vescari did not live in a vacuum. He was the head of a family, an organization, and the penthouse was its nerve center, and like any living organism, his world had a pulse. That pulse had become erratic. Word spreads in the underworld not like fire, but like a stain, a dark, quiet seepage. The boss was protecting someone. The boss had cleared his penthouse. The boss had retired Russo over a maid. Now that same maid was no longer a maid. She was a ghost, living on his private floor, shadowed by Gia, his best. In the clubs and warehouses of Eastbourne, men who owed Dario loyalty began to whisper. Men who were his rivals began to listen. A boss was strong, but a man with a weakness was a target. His enemies, sniffing for that weakness, began to probe. Elira felt it not as a threat, but as a pressure. The penthouse, once her invisible hiding place, had become a 5-star prison. She hadn't breathed outside air in 3 weeks. The city glittered below her, a beautiful, tormenting mirage. I need to go out, Dario, she said one morning. He was reading reports on a tablet, the rising sun catching the hard planes of his face. No, it was flat. Final. I am not your property. I am a person. I need to walk. I need air. She was pacing, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. Just for an hour. To a market. With Gia. With 10 guards. I don't care. But I cannot stay in these rooms another day. He looked up, his dark eyes assessing her. He saw the frantic energy, the pale skin, the faint shadows under her eyes. He was protecting her, but the protection was hollowing her out. He made a sharp, decisive gesture. 1 hour. The farmer's market at the waterfront, Gia, and 2 cars, Franco and Leo. He was relenting. She almost cried with relief. The market was an explosion of life, the scent of fresh bread, lavender and damp earth. The sound of vendors calling out, of music, of people laughing. Elira walked through it, Gia a silent shadow at her side, with Franco and Leo 15 feet back, their eyes constantly scanning. Elira felt a ghost of her old self return. She bought a small carton of fresh strawberries, her fingers brushing the vendors, a simple human contact that felt shockingly intimate. She was, for 10 minutes, almost normal. Then she felt it. It was the old sensation, the one that had kept her alive for a decade, the feeling of a gaze that was not browsing, but hunting. She slowed, pretending to look at a display of honey. She glanced at her reflection in the vendor's glass case. A man, nondescript, in a gray coat, 2 stalls back. He was not looking at the fruit. He was looking at her. She turned to Gia, her face pale. Someone is watching. Gia didn't look. She didn't tense. She simply touched her ear. Target acquired, gray coat, 9 o'clock. We're moving. The extraction was silent, professional, and terrifying. Gia's hand was suddenly on her back, steering her. Walk normal, Elira, towards the east exit. Franco and Leo closed the distance, forming a diamond around her. They moved through the crowd, not pushing, but parting it with sheer, menacing intent. Elira chanced one look back. The man in the gray coat was gone, but another man, by the bread stall, was now watching them. He lifted a phone to his ear. They were in the black sedan and pulling into traffic in less than a minute. Elira was trembling, the strawberries forgotten in her lap. When they returned to the penthouse, Dario was waiting. He didn't ask what happened. He looked at Gia, who gave a single, sharp nod. Dario's face became a mask of cold, controlled fury. He looked at Franco and Leo. My office. Now. Elira never saw Franco or Leo again. That night, Dario came to her room. You are not to leave this floor, he said. There was no room for argument in his voice. Not the penthouse. This floor. Gia will bring you whatever you need. That's not protection, Dario. That's a sentence. It's the only way I can keep you alive, he said, and walked out. The frustration built for 6 days. 6 days of staring at the same walls, the same priceless art, the same glittering, unattainable view. She was a bird in a cage so large she was supposed to think it was the sky. On the 7th day, she snapped. She stormed out of her room past a startled Gia and slammed open the door to his office. He was on a call, his voice hard. He held up a finger, motioning for her to wait. I will not wait, she said, her voice shaking with a rage she hadn't known she possessed. Dario's eyes narrowed. He spoke a single, sharp sentence in Italian into the phone and hung up. You have no right, she said, advancing on his desk. You have no right to do this. You are not my father. You are not my husband. And you are not my jailer. I am the man keeping you from being a name in a police report, he said, standing slowly. He was a wall of muscle and menace, but she was too angry to be afraid. By locking me in a tower, I survived 10 years on my own. I was fine before I met you. I was fine before Russo, before you decided I was your project. You were fine? He scoffed, walking around the desk toward her. You were crying on my floor with a guard's handprint on your arm. You were a week away from being discovered. You were not fine. You were lucky, and your luck ran out. This isn't luck. This is hell, she screamed, the sound tearing from her. You are just like him, just like your father, controlling, violent, deciding who lives and who dies and who gets locked away. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she had crossed a line. His face went blank, the civilized mask disappearing, leaving something raw and dangerous. "Do not," he whispered, his voice vibrating with a low, lethal energy. "Ever say that to me?" "It's the truth," she cried, desperate to make him feel a fraction of her own pain. "You're a monster, just like he was." She shoved him, her hands hit his chest, a desperate, futile gesture. His reaction was not thought, it was instinct, in a move so fast she couldn't process it. He had her. His hands clamped around her wrists, his grip like steel. He used her own momentum to slam her back against the wall, his body caging hers, his face inches from her own. The air was sucked from her lungs. She was trapped, her wrists pinned by her head, his hips braced against hers, his entire, powerful frame pressing her into the plaster. They were both breathing hard. The silence of the office was deafening, broken only by their ragged gasps. His dark eyes were not cold. They were on fire, blazing with an anger that matched her own, and something else beneath it, something deeper. "You push me, Alira," he breathed, his voice a low growl. "You think you know me? You have no idea what I am. Let me go," she panted, but the words had no force. The fight was gone, replaced by a sudden, terrifying awareness of his body, the heat of his chest through his shirt, the strength in his hands, the scent of him, sandalwood and clean, sharp ozone. The anger in his eyes was melting, the hard edges blurring, replaced by that same dark intensity she had seen the night he kissed her. The tension that had snapped between them was not breaking. It was coiling. "I can't," he whispered, and he didn't mean her wrists. He lowered his head, and his mouth captured hers. It was not gentle. It was not a parley. It was a collision. It was all the anger, all the frustration, all the fear of the last weeks, exploding in a single desperate act. His lips were hard, demanding, bruising. He kissed her like he was laying claim, like he was trying to devour the very fight that had driven her, and she kissed him back. She met his force with her own, a sob of surrender and defiance rising in her throat. She strained against his grip, not to escape, but to get closer. His tongue swept her mouth, and she answered, her hands twisting in his grasp. He released her wrists, not to let her go, but to move. One hand slid to her waist, pulling her flush against him, lifting her from the floor, the other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss. He backed her up, his mouth never leaving hers, until the back of her legs hit the edge of his massive mahogany desk. With a groan, he lifted her, seating her on the smooth, cool wood. Scattering papers and files, he stepped between her legs, caging her again, his body a hot, heavy pressure against hers. It was too much. It was too fast. It was everything she had been running from, and everything she had, in a secret, terrified part of her, begun to crave. He pulled back. His chest heaving. His forehead rested against hers, his eyes closed. He was shaking. "Dario," she breathed, her hands clutching his shoulders. He opened his eyes. They were dark, clouded with a desire so potent it made her dizzy. He looked at her swollen lips, her wild hair, her body trembling on his desk. He took a deep, shuddering breath and stepped back. He ran a hand through his hair, his control visibly snapping back into place, piece by painful piece. "I'm not going to take you like this," he said, his voice raw, angry, desperate, "not like this." She stared at him, her heart hammering. She slid off the desk, her legs unsteady. The rage was gone, leaving her exposed and shaking. He didn't look at her. He walked to the window, his back to her, his hands braced on the glass. "The night my father died," he said, his voice quiet. "I was in this office. He was shanked in the prison yard. They called me at 3 a.m. Alira wrapped her arms around herself, listening. "After the funeral, I cleaned out his old study. I found his private files. He was meticulous. He kept everything." He paused. "He had a file on your father, on the case that sent him away." Dario turned to face her. His expression was bleak. There was evidence in that file, a deposition from an informant, tapes. It proved that your father's star witness was compromised, that he had been fed information, that the case was built on entrapment. It wouldn't have just freed my father. It would have ruined William Dawn. It would have cleared his name. Elira's blood ran cold. What did you do? I was 22 years old, he said, his voice hollow. My father was in the ground. Your father was a national hero. And I had the truth in my hands. He looked at the unlit fireplace across the room. I burned it. I burned all of it. I chose my father's legacy over the truth. He looked at her, and she saw the prison he lived in. It was not a penthouse. It was that moment. So you see, he whispered, you were right. I am my father's son. I protected him. Even when he was wrong, I am a monster. Elira walked toward him, her fear gone, replaced by a sudden, aching clarity. She saw the man, not the boss, the boy who had been forced to become a king. You were a boy, she said, her voice soft. You were protecting your family. And you? He countered. Are you still protecting yours? The question hung in the air. She owed him her own confession. I have a brother, she said, the words she had guarded for a decade finally tumbling out. His name is Milo. He's 21. He's been hiding, too. He's working at a garage in the South End. Dario's gaze sharpened. All business. He's not safe. He's all I have, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so scared for him. Dario, all the time. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he stood close, his presence a shield. Give me his name. The garage. I'll bring him here. Tonight, I'll put my best men on him. He will be as safe as you are. She looked up at him, her heart torn. And trap him? She asked, her voice breaking. Like me? In this world? I've spent 10 years trying to keep him free of this. If you bring him here, he'll never be free again. The dilemma, their shared, impossible dilemma, settled between them. Later that night, the tension remained, but it had changed. It was no longer angry. It was raw, vulnerable. Elira was in the massive guest bathroom, soaking in a tub so deep it was almost a pool, trying to scrub the day from her skin. The door opened. It was Dario. She didn't reach for a towel. She was past false modesty. She just watched him. He said nothing. He unbuttoned his cuffs and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his strong, tanned forearms, which were dusted with dark hair. He picked up a thick, soft cloth from the counter, dipped it in the hot water, and knelt beside the tub. Turn around, he said softly. She hesitated, then obeyed, turning to face the blank marble wall, her back to him. He took the cloth, heavy with warm water and soap, and began to wash her back. His touch was firm, methodical, not sexual. It was intimate in a way that sex could never be. It was an act of service, of care. He moved from her shoulders, down her spine, his hand gentle over her ribs. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek to drip into the water. I want to wash all this away, he whispered, his voice rough. Your father, mine, all of it, the blood, the secrets. I want to wash it off of you. He rinsed the cloth and ran it over her shoulders again. I just don't know how. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her room until her legs ached. Just before dawn, she found herself at his bedroom door. It was open a crack, as if he'd been waiting. He was in bed, awake, reading a book under a single dim light. He looked up as she entered. He set the book aside and held back the covers. It was an invitation. She crossed the room, slid under the sheets, and lay on her side, facing him. He turned off the light, plunging the room into the soft darkness of the city at night. He didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her with desire. He simply pulled her against his chest, his arm wrapping around her, his hand resting on her hair. He held her. She was safe. She was in the arms of her father's enemy, the man who had burned the truth, and she had never felt safer in her life. As she finally drifted off, his breath warm on her hair, she heard him whisper something, his voice a low, soft rumble against her ear. It was in Italian, a language she didn't understand, but the tone was a caress. Piccola mia, sei al sicuro adesso, my little one. You are safe now. Across town, in a smoky, dark office that smelled of stale cigars, a man named Marco Tira hung up the phone. Tira was Dario's oldest rival, a man who believed Vescari was weak, too polished, too corporate. He smiled, his teeth stained brown. An informant at the waterfront market had just delivered the most interesting news he'd heard in a decade. Dario Vescari's new obsession, the girl he was keeping under armed guard, was not just a maid. She was Elira Dawn, the daughter of the prosecutor. Well, Dario, Tira said to the empty room. You just handed me the knife, and I know exactly where to put it. He picked up his phone and began to make a plan. The first call came at dawn. Dario was standing by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching Elira sleep. She was in his bed, a place he had never shared, and her presence there felt both fragile and permanent. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a low, angry sound. He picked it up. It was his man in the Eastbourne docks, a man whose entire job was to listen. Boss, it's Tira. The man's voice was tight. He knows. He's got a name. William Dawn's daughter. Dario's blood went cold. He looked at Elira, at the peaceful vulnerability of her sleeping face. He had failed. He had brought her into the light, and the light had cast a shadow. He's activated 3 crews, his man continued. They're not just watching, they're hunting. Dario hung up without a word. He stood motionless for a full minute, the rage building in him like a physical pressure. He was a king in his own city, and he had just learned a rival was poaching on his most private territory. He woke her gently, his hand on her shoulder, her eyes fluttered open, still soft with sleep. Elira, get up. You have to pack. The softness vanished, replaced by the old, familiar alertness. What is it? What's wrong? It's Marco Tira. He knows who you are. He walked to his closet, pulling out a duffel bag. I have a property upstate. It's a fortress. You'll be on a plane in an hour. She got out of bed, pulling the sheet with her, her heart hammering. He was packing for her. He was sending her away. The same words she had heard her whole life. Run. Hide. No. He stopped, his back to her. This is not a discussion. No, she said again, her voice stronger. She walked around him, forcing him to look at her. I'm not running. Dario, I've been running my entire life. I ran after my father died. I ran for Milo. I'm done. This is not courage, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. This is stupidity. He's not Russo. He's a butcher. He will not just hurt you. He will use you to get to me. And what happens when he finds me upstate, or in another city, or another country? He'll always be hunting me. You'll always be worrying. I will not live in another cage, waiting for the lock to be picked. So what? He shot back, his frustration exploding. You'll stay here. You'll fight him. With what? Your pride. With you, she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. I'm not running. Not this time. He stared at her, seeing the terrified girl he'd found on his floor finally, completely eclipsed by the woman in front of him. She was stubborn, she was terrified, and she was not. He realized, going to break. He slammed the duffel bag onto the bed. Fine. You want to stay? You want to fight? Then you're going to learn how... He agreed, reluctantly, to train her. The penthouse gym was a state-of-the-art facility, all glass and polished steel, overlooking the city, but it became their crucible. It started with basics. Your center of gravity is low, he'd say, his voice all business. Use it. Leverage, not strength. He taught her how to break a wrist hold, the same one Russo had used. He showed her how to use her elbows, her knees. He was a patient, precise teacher, but he was not gentle. He won't be gentle, he said, grabbing her arm, his grip just shy of painful. He won't stop. You have to make him stop. Again. The sessions were intense. They were physical, sweaty, and crackling with an energy that had nothing to do with fighting. It was the forced, intimate contact, his hands on her waist, correcting her stance, her body slamming against his as she learned to block. The clean scent of his soap, the musky scent of their exertion. They were, for hours a day, locked in a violent, controlled dance. He was pushing her, and he was amazed to find that she pushed back. She was not a fighter. But she was a survivor. She was smart, fast, and fueled by a decade of suppressed rage. One night, she finally got the better of him. He came at her in a simulated attack, and she moved just as he'd taught her, ducking under his arm, driving her elbow into his ribs, and spinning out of his grasp. It was a perfect execution. He stood there, winded, a rare, faint smile of approval on his lips. Good. She was breathing hard, her hair stuck to her face, her eyes bright with triumph. Not bad. For a girl. The air shifted. The training was over. They were just a man and a woman, standing too close, their bodies humming. I don't think, he said, his voice low, that anyone has ever mistaken you for just a girl. They argued later that same night. The high of the training had faded, and the reality of their situation returned. He was still mapping escape routes. She was still pacing the cage. You're teaching me to fight, but you still won't let me leave the floor, she accused him, following him into his study. The training is a last resort, a lira, not an invitation to go looking for trouble. You're not listening to me. I'm not a child. Dario, I'm not a porcelain doll. I'm a woman who is telling you she is choosing to be here. Why can't you accept that? Because your choice is going to get you killed, he roared, turning on her. Because for the first time in my goddamn life, I have something I cannot stand to lose, and she is standing in front of me, telling me she wants to be bait. The confession hung in the air, raw and shocking. He hadn't just admitted his fear. He had admitted his love, the anger drained out of her, replaced by a wave of pure, aching emotion. Dario, she whispered. The shouting match was over. The silence that rushed in was deafening, filled with everything they hadn't said. He looked at her, his chest heaving, his eyes dark with a desperate, unguarded truth. It was that truth that broke them. He didn't move. She did. She crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed him. It was a desperate, claiming kiss, her hands coming up to frame his face, her body pressing against his. This was not the tentative exploration in the dining room. This was a decision. He responded instantly, a groan tearing from his chest, his hands clamped onto her waist, lifting her, pulling her so tight against him there was no space left for air, for doubt. The kiss was a storm. All the anger and fear and stubbornness melting into a ferocious, undeniable need. This was not a fight for control. It was a total, mutual surrender. She tugged at his shirt, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. He pulled back, his breathing ragged, and ripped the shirt open himself, the buttons scattering across the floor. She put her hands on his bare chest. His skin was hot, his muscles tense beneath her palms. He was real. This was real. He lowered his head, his mouth leaving hers to trace a line of fire down her jaw, to the pulse that hammered in her throat. "Alira," he breathed, his voice a prayer against her skin. He lifted her into his arms, his mouth returning to hers, and carried her into the bedroom. He didn't turn on the lights. The city skyline was all the illumination they needed. He laid her on the bed, on the dark, cool sheets, and for a moment, he just looked at her, the man who had everything, looking at the one thing he truly wanted. Then he began. He made love to her with a slow, intense reverence that undid her. He was not the boss. He was not the warrior. He was just a man, deeply and achingly in love. He kissed her face, her eyelids, her temples, as if memorizing her. His hands, so strong and capable, were impossibly gentle, stroking her arms, her sides, her legs. He moved down, his lips brushing her collarbone, the swell of her breast. He was unhurried, his touch a slow, spreading fire. It was an act of worship. He was kissing away the scars, the years of running, the identity of the maid. He was kissing her, Alira, back into existence. When he finally came inside her, it was a slow, perfect union, a homecoming. She wrapped her legs around him, her hands clutching his shoulders, tears of release and relief streaming from her eyes. It was not a desperate collision. It was an anchoring. It was two. Broken, lost pieces, finally, clicking into place. Afterward, they lay tangled, their limbs intertwined, their breathing slowly returning to normal. The silence was perfect, peaceful. Alira, her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart, knew she had to say it. She had to give him the same truth he had given her. "I'm in love with you, Dario." She felt him go still. He didn't answer. The silence stretched, and a cold sliver of fear began to creep into her. He let out a long, slow breath. His hand, which had been stroking her hair, tightened, holding her close. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. "That's the only truth I trust now." The next day, the peace held. It was a bubble, fragile and beautiful. Dario had meetings, but he took them in the penthouse, his eyes constantly finding her. Elira felt light. For the first time, she was not hiding. Late in the afternoon, she went to the rooftop garden. It was her one concession to freedom, a small, glass-enclosed atrium with climbing vines and rows of herbs. Gia went with her, as always, and 2 other guards stood by the elevator. Elira was kneeling, her fingers in the dirt, breathing in the scent of rosemary and damp earth. "It's beautiful up here," she said to Gia. Gia smiled, a rare, small smile. "The boss had it built for his mother." Elira felt a pang of connection. She was about to ask more when Gia's body went stiff. "Miss Dawn," Gia said, her voice suddenly tight. "Step back." Elira looked up. Gia's hand was on her weapon. The 2 guards by the elevator were not moving. They were slumped, unnaturally, against the wall. A man stepped out from behind a large terracotta planter. He was smiling. It was not Marco Tsira. It was a man she didn't know, but his eyes were cold and dead. He held a small, black object, not a gun, a dart gun. "Gia?" Elira whispered. Gia shoved Elira behind her, drawing her pistol. "He's here! Sira's on the roof!" she yelled into her earpiece. The man fired. The dart was silent, and it embedded itself in Gia's neck. Her eyes widened in shock. She fired 1 shot, which shattered the glass wall. Before her knees buckled, she collapsed, her hand reaching for Elira. "Run!" Gia gasped, and then she was unconscious. Elira scrambled backward, her heart exploding in her chest. Hands, rough and strong, grabbed her from behind. Another man. She opened her mouth to scream, but a thick, chemical-soaked cloth was clamped over her face. The world dissolved in a sharp, black tilt. Dario heard the gunshot. He was in his office, and the sound, even muffled, was unmistakable. He was moving before the sound finished echoing, his own gun in his hand, his mind a sudden, cold void of terror. He burst onto the roof. He saw his men slumped. He saw Gia, a dart in her neck, unconscious but breathing. And he saw Elira's gardening glove, lying on the scattered dirt. She was gone. Dario Vescari launched a hunt that would be talked about in Eastbourne for decades. He did not call the police. He called his captains. He became a machine. His grief, his terror, he locked it away. All that was left was the cold, lethal rage. He sealed the city, bridges, tunnels, the harbor. His men were everywhere. He found the first lead in 20 minutes, a black van, seen speeding from the service entrance. He tracked it to a Sierra-owned auto body shop. He went in personally. He was not a boss directing traffic. He was the tip of the spear. The shop was empty, but he found 3 men in the back office. They were low-level, stupid. They smiled when they saw him. "Boss Vescari, lost your way?" Dario didn't speak. The fight lasted less than a minute. It was not a fight. It was a dismantling. When it was over, he was standing, and they were on the floor, broken. "Where is he?" Dario asked the one who was still conscious. The man spat blood. "Go to hell!" Dario picked up a tire iron. "I'll go after I send you." 10 minutes later, he had a new address, a fish processing plant. He went there, his suit now torn, a cut bleeding over his left eye. He found a second crew, this one prepared. Gunfire erupted. Dario moved through the ice-packed rooms, a ghost, his movements precise, economical, and utterly ruthless. He left 2 men wounded and 1 dead, and found the next clue, a warehouse, back on the docks, Sierra's main distribution point. He'd gone through 3 safe houses, 3 layers of Sierra's operation. He was close. Elira woke up to the smell of rust and salt water. She was tied to a metal chair, her wrists and ankles burning. "Ah, the sleeping princess is awake!" She looked up. A heavy, balding man in a stained suit was sitting on a crate, smoking a cigar. Marco Tsira. He was exactly as Dario had described. A butcher. "He'll kill you for this," Alira whispered, her throat raw. "Will he?" Tsira laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "He's a busy man, and a proud one. I'm about to make him look like a fool." He gestured to a camera set up on a tripod. "You see, he's been hiding you. His little secret, his weakness. I'm just exposing him to the world." He stood, walking over to her. "First, I'm going to send a video to every family, the Vascari boss, brought to his knees by a prosecutor's daughter. Then, I'm going to send a copy to the feds. Imagine that. Alira Dawn, alive and well, living with the Vascari family. It'll destroy him." Alira's mind was racing. He was a gloater. He was arrogant. She could use that. "And what good does that do you?" she said, forcing her voice to be steady. "He'll just deny it. He can't deny a video. Kara, but he will hunt you," she pressed. What if I helped you?" Tsira paused, intrigued. "Helped me? I hate him." She lied, pouring every ounce of her old fear into the words. "He locked me up. He's a monster. I know his operation. I know his security. I can give you everything." Tsira stared at her, his small, piggish eyes narrowing. He was considering it. She was buying seconds. He smiled. "That's good. You're smart, like your father." He raised his hand and slapped her, hard. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding in pain. "But I'm smarter," Tsira sneered. He pulled a long, thin knife from his belt. "I think I'll just kill you. Simpler. I'll send him your pretty head in a box. That will send the message." He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back, and pressed the cold steel of the knife to her throat. Alira squeezed her eyes shut. "Dario!" The main warehouse door did not open. It exploded. The entire massive steel door was ripped from its hinges as a black SUV. Dario's smashed through it at full speed. The SUV screeched to a halt, its headlights pinning Tsira and Alira in their glare. Dario stepped out of the driver's side. He was not the man from the penthouse. He was covered in blood, his and others. His suit was in tatters. His face was a mask of pure, demonic rage. "Get away from her!" he commanded, his voice a low vibration that shook the entire warehouse. Tsira panicked, dragged Alira from the chair, holding her as a shield, the knife still at her throat. "One more step, Vascari, and she dies. I'll do it, I swear I will." Dario didn't stop. He walked forward, his steps measured, a terrifying, relentless advance. He raised his gun. "You'll shoot through her? You love her!" Tsira screamed, his hand shaking. "You're right," Dario said. He was 10 feet away. He fired. The shot was deafening. Alira screamed, but she felt no pain. Marco Tsira's eyes went wide. He looked down at his own chest, where a dark, blooming stain was spreading. He had not shot Tsira. He had shot past Alira, hitting Tsira in the shoulder, just enough to make his grip falter. Tsira roared, his knife arm dropping, and it was all the opening Dario needed. He crossed the last 10 feet in an instant. He grabbed Tsira's knife hand and shattered his wrist. He slammed Tsira against a metal pillar. The sound echoing, Tsira dropped the knife. Dario didn't stop. He fired again and again, point blank. He emptied the clip into Marco Tsira's chest, his face a mask of terrible, blank fury. The gunshots stopped. The only sound was the clicking of the empty hammer. Marco Tsira slid to the floor, dead before he hit the ground. The silence that followed was absolute. Alira was on her knees, shaking, deafened. Dario stood over the body, his chest heaving. The gun fell from his numb fingers, clattering on the concrete. He turned to her. The rage was gone, his eyes no longer blazing. They were just empty, broken. He stumbled toward her, falling to his knees, and pulled her into his arms. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe, his entire body shaking with the adrenaline and the horror. He buried his face in her hair, his shoulders trembling. He held her for a long time, rocking her, his breath ragged. "Never again," he whispered, his voice wrecked. "Never again." He didn't take her back to the penthouse. He didn't take her anywhere in Eastbourne. He bundled her into a different, nondescript SUV he pulled from a locked garage beneath the warehouse. his bloody hands leaving streaks on the steering wheel. He drove for 2 hours, north, away from the coast, away from the city, his jaw set in a line of coiled, silent fury. Alira sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket he had pulled from the back, her body vibrating with a delayed, bone-deep shock. They didn't speak. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the steady, rhythmic clicking of the turn signal as he navigated a labyrinth of dark, winding country roads. He finally turned onto a gravel path, hidden by a curtain of overgrown pine trees. The house was at the end of it, a simple, dark wood A-frame. Invisible from the road, it smelled of damp earth and cedar. It was the safest place she had ever been. He unlocked the door, his movements stiff. He disarmed a keypad inside, then walked straight to the fireplace, striking a match and setting the kindling ablaze. He was a man running on the last fumes of adrenaline. Alira stood in the center of the small, simple room, the blanket still clutched around her. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the icy, hollow feeling of what had almost happened. She looked at her wrists, the skin red and raw from the ropes. She touched the tender, swelling bruise on her cheek where Sira had struck her. Dario turned from the fire, and his eyes landed on her face. He saw the mark. The last of his control evaporated. It wasn't an explosion of rage. It was an implosion of guilt. "He touched you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He crossed the room, his hands hovering, afraid to touch the bruise he hadn't been able to prevent. "I'm fine, Dario. You're not fine." He cut her off, his voice raw. He turned away, slamming his fist into the wall, a sharp, cracking sound that made her jump. "This is my fault. All of it. I knew Sira was probing. I knew he was looking. I kept you in the penthouse. I kept you close, and I turned you into a target." He was pacing, a caged, wounded animal. "I should have sent you away. The second I saw that tattoo, I should have put you on a plane. No?" Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his self-recrimination. He stopped pacing and looked at her. "No," she said again, letting the blanket drop to the floor. She was in her torn, dirty clothes, but she stood tall. "That would have been running. That's what I've always done. I am not your victim. Dario, I am not your weakness. I am not a target. I am a choice. I chose to stay." She stepped toward him, into his space, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Do you understand me? I am not here because I am scared of the world. I am here because I am in love with you. And I will not be hidden like a dirty secret or a liability." He stared at her, the truth of her words finally penetrating his guilt. She was not a girl to be protected. She was a woman who had stood her ground. He reached out, his hand trembling, and gently, so gently, cupped her bruised cheek. "He will pay for this," he whispered. "He already did," she said, leaning her face into his hand. "He's gone. We're here." He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair, and just held her, his entire body shaking as the violence of the day finally claimed its price. They spent 3 days in that house, 3 days where the world outside ceased to exist. There were no cell phones, no televisions, no guards. There was only the sound of the fire, the wind in the pines, and their own breathing. The first day, they slept. It was a dead, heavy sleep, a shared trauma response. They woke in the late afternoon, tangled in the sheets of the cabin's only bed, their bodies aching. The second day, they found the calm. Dario, she discovered, was a surprisingly good cook. He found a stocked pantry, flour, dried beans, canned goods, and a freezer full of game. He moved around the small kitchen with an economy of motion, making them thick. Rich coffee and a simple stew. They ate at the rough-hewn wooden table, the fire crackling beside them. It was the first normal, domestic moment of their lives. That night, the intimacy that had been forged in violence and confessions found a new language. It was not the desperate, claiming passion of their first night. It was tender. It began with him tracing the rope burns on her wrists, his touch feather-light. He lifted her hand to his mouth and kissed the raw skin, a silent apology. She saw the guilt still swimming in his eyes, and she leaned in, kissing him slowly, a kiss that tasted of coffee and safety. He led her to the bedroom, and he undressed her with a slow, careful reverence. He was not just removing clothes, he was removing armor. He kissed the bruise on her cheek, the fading mark on her wrist, the old faint scar on her shoulder from a childhood fall. He made love to her not like a boss claiming his prize, but like a man memorizing a miracle. It was a slow, quiet conversation of skin and breath, a giving and a taking so gentle it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. He held her face between his hands as he moved inside her, his eyes locked on hers, and she felt, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly seen. Afterward, they lay in the dark, the fire painting shifting shadows on the walls. She was curled against his side, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I never told you," she whispered into the quiet, "how my father really died." She felt his hand pause. He waited. "I was in the car, in the back seat. Milo was next to me." She spoke, her voice flat and distant as the images returned. "It was raining, that truck. It didn't just hit us, it hunted us. It hit us once, and my father spun the wheel, trying to get away, but it came back. It T-boned us, pushing us into the guardrail." She took a shaky breath. "He was alive. He was trying to unbuckle his belt. He was looking back at us. He was telling us to run. That's all he said. Run, Elira. Take Milo. Run." Dario's arm tightened around her, his knuckles white. The man from the truck got out. He had a tire iron. My father was still trapped. I watched. She choked, the words tearing at her throat. "I watched him. I couldn't move. I just held Milo's head, pressed his face into my coat so he couldn't see." She was crying now, the silent, terrible tears of a memory that never faded. When it was over, he looked at us. The man, he looked right at me, and he just smiled, then he walked away. We sat there for an hour, in the silence, with him. When the police finally came, they didn't comfort us. They put blankets over us and pulled us away. They asked us questions. They kept us in a gray room for hours. My father's friends, the other agents, they all disappeared. No one protected us. No one. She finished, the story told, the worst of her, left bare in the dark. Dario was silent for a long time. He didn't offer empty comforts. He didn't say it would be okay. He simply shifted, pulling her on top of him, holding her face between his hands. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her tear-soaked cheeks. He kissed her with a desperate, profound tenderness. He was kissing the scars, the ones Sira had left, and the ones her past had burned into her soul. "I am here now," he whispered, his voice thick. "I will never, ever let anyone hurt you again. You are not alone, not anymore." On the third morning, the peace was broken by a high-tech ringing. Dario pulled a satellite phone from his stashed duffel bag. His face hardened. The boss returning. "Yeah." He listened, his body tensing. "Where? Is he clean?" He was silent for a long moment. "Good, hold him. I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at Elira. His expression was one she hadn't seen before, a strange, nervous hope. "Milo," he said. "My men found him. The garage you mentioned, he's safe. He's clean. No one from Sira's crew ever got near him." Elira's hand flew to her mouth. Milo. Her brother. The one person she had run to protect. The one she had left behind. Tears streamed down her face. But this time they were not for grief. They were for a future she had never thought possible. "He's safe?" she cried, half laughing, half sobbing. "He's safe," Dario confirmed, pulling her into a hug. "Let's go. Let's go bring your brother home." The drive back to Eastbourne was the opposite of the drive out. Elira was alive with a nervous, vibrant energy, asking 1,000 questions. "Is he okay? Was he scared? Where are they keeping him?" "He's at a holding property in the city," Dario said, one hand on the wheel, the other holding hers. "He's fine, just confused. My men told him his sister had arranged for his protection." They were on a 2-lane highway, winding through the forested hills just outside the city limits. Dario was driving the same black SUV. now clean of blood. Elira was looking at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had a brother. She had this man. She had a life. It happened so fast she barely processed it. A black sedan, one she didn't recognize, pulled out from a hidden dirt road, blocking their path. Simultaneously, a heavy-duty truck smashed into their rear bumper. The SUV fishtailed, the sound of screaming metal filling the air. "Ambush!" Dario roared. He slammed the brakes, but the truck hit them again, harder, shunting them toward the edge of the road, toward a steep ravine. Dario didn't try to fight the car. He had one. Singular focus. Elira. He unbuckled his seatbelt in a single motion. "Elira, down!" He threw his body over hers, shielding her, forcing her head down onto her knees, just as the sedan's windows lowered. The world exploded in a series of deafening, echoing cracks. 3, 4, 5 shots, the sound of bullets punching through the metal of the car, the spider webbing of the passenger side glass. Then, silence. Elira was shaking, her ears ringing. Dario's full weight was on her. He was impossibly heavy. "Dario?" she whispered. He didn't move. "Dario!" she screamed, shoving at his shoulders. He slumped off her, falling back into the driver's seat. His face was pale, his eyes half closed. A dark, rapidly spreading stain was blooming on his white shirt. High on his right side, near his ribs. "Go!" he gasped, his hand fumbling for the door. "Elira! Run! Get out!" She heard car doors slam. The men from the sedan were coming, yelling to each other. "He's still in there! Finish him!" She looked at Dario, at the blood, at the men advancing, and the girl who had run her entire life finally, definitively, died. "No," she said, her voice a low, furious growl. She unbuckled him, grabbing his arm. "You have to move, now!" Adrenaline, pure and cold, flooded her. She shoved open the driver's door, pulling his dead weight with her. He groaned, a deep, agonizing sound. "I can't. Shut up and move," she commanded. She dragged him out of the driver's seat and shoved him bodily into the passenger side, climbing over him to get behind the wheel. The men were 20 yards away, raising their guns. Elira didn't hesitate. She slammed the car into drive. The engine, miraculously, was still alive. She floored the accelerator. The SUV leaped forward, smashing straight through the black sedan that blocked their path. Metal shrieked, glass exploded. Elira held the wheel steady, her eyes fixed on the road, as bullets sparked against the back of the SUV. She drove, her foot pressed to the floor, not looking back. She took the first exit, then a side road, then another, her mind working with a cold, clear precision. They couldn't go to the penthouse. They couldn't go to any of his known properties. But she remembered the long nights he'd held her, the stories he'd told her about his family, his past. "An old distillery," she whispered, her hands white on the wheel. "North of the river. My grandfather's first. No one's been there in 20 years. She found it an hour later. An old stone building, choked with ivy. She half carried, half dragged the now semi-conscious Dario inside, kicking open the rotted wooden door. She laid him on a dusty, canvas-covered workbench. He was bleeding, badly. "Elira!" he gasped, his hand clutching his side. It's through. I think. It's through." She ripped his shirt open, a ragged entry wound in his side, and an angrier exit wound in his back. He was right. It had passed through. But he was losing too much blood. Her eyes scanned the room. Panic tried to claw at her, but she beat it down. She found a heavy-duty industrial first aid kit on the wall, and on a nearby shelf, a bottle of unlabeled whiskey and a canvas repair kit with thick, curved needles and dark, wax thread. She grabbed them. Dario's eyes widened as he saw the needle. "No, Elira, you can't." "Be quiet," she ordered, her voice trembling, but her hands surprisingly steady. She uncorked the whiskey. "This is going to hurt." She poured the alcohol directly onto the wounds. Dario roared, his back arching off the table. A sound of pure, unadulterated agony. "I'm sorry," she wept, the tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." She threaded the needle. "Bite this. She shoved a piece of clean canvas into his hand. She put the needle to his skin. He didn't bite the canvas. He reached out and grabbed her free hand, his grip like a vice. She began to stitch. She was clumsy, the work brutal and ugly, but the bleeding was slowing. She was sobbing, the needle slipping in her fingers, but she didn't stop. He grunted with every pull of the thread, his face ashen, sweat pouring off him, but he never let go of her hand. She finished, her entire body shaking. She tied off the last stitch and collapsed against him, her head on his chest. He was still breathing. His hand, still clutching hers, was weak, but it was there. "You're stronger," he whispered, his voice a faint rasp, "than any woman I've known." He slipped into unconsciousness. Elira sat there for a minute, the blood of the man she loved all over her. She was no longer crying. She was cold. She searched his pockets and found the satellite phone. She powered it on. She knew who to call, the one person she trusted. The phone rang twice. "Gia, where are you?" Gia's voice was sharp. "We heard the alert. We lost you." "I'm at the old Vescari distillery, north of the river," Elira said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Dario is shot. He's alive, but he's bad. Sierra's men are rogue. They're not just his crew. They're the ones who wanted his territory. They're still out there. I'm sending a team. We'll be there in 30 minutes. "No," Elira said. "You'll come. Alone. Bring a doctor. A clean one. And bring the men who are loyal to him, not just to the family, the quiet ones. The ones who served his father. And Gia. Yes? Go to the holding property first. Get my brother. Bring him, too. Elira, that's not a secure—" "Bring him to me," Elira commanded, her voice turning to ice. "I'm not running, I'm not hiding, and I'm not waiting to be rescued. We are going to finish this. On my terms." She hung up the phone. She stood, walking to the grimy window, and stared out at the dark woods. The prey was done hiding. Gia arrived first. She was not alone. A quiet, older man with a medical bag came with her, as did 3 other men Elira had never seen. They were not the young, flashy bodyguards in sharp suits. They were older, with scars and the kind of quiet authority that needed no weapon to be felt. They were Dario's father's men, the old guard. While the doctor began working on Dario, cutting away the crude stitches, cleaning the wound and administering an IV, Gia pulled Elira aside. "We have your brother," Gia said, her voice low and efficient. "He is secure. He is waiting in an armored car 2 miles from here." Elira nodded, the cold, clear focus still holding her. Bring him here. I want a perimeter on this building in 10 minutes. Gia's eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of question. "Elira, this is not a secure compound. It's a fortress." Elira cut her off, her voice like ice. "It has one way in and one way out, and a 360-degree field of fire. Do it, and get me the satellite phone. I'm calling a meeting." For the next 2 hours, Elira Dawn, the former maid, the prosecutor's daughter, orchestrated a war. She sat on a dusty crate, Dario's blood drying on her clothes, and she made calls. She summoned the 6 capos who ran Dario's territories. She didn't request their presence. She informed them of it. She used Dario's name, but her voice was her own. The distillery. Midnight. "We have a traitor to discuss," she said to each, and hung up. Her brother arrived, flanked by 2 of the old guard soldiers. Milo was thin, pale, and shaking, his eyes wide with a terror she knew intimately. He saw her, covered in drying blood, and he flinched. "El? Oh God, El, what is this? Who are these people?" She walked to him and grabbed his face, her hands firm. "Listen to me, Milo. You are safe. This is the end of it. The running stops tonight. You're going to stay in that room, and you are not going to make a sound. Do you understand me?" He stared at her. This was not the sister who had hidden him. This was a queen. He nodded, speechless. Dario woke up just before 10. The doctor had given him blood, stitched him properly, and he was pale, weak, and furious. He saw Elira standing by the window, talking to Gia, pointing to a hand-drawn map of the property. "Elira!" His voice was a raw rasp. She was at his side in an instant. "You're awake. The doctor said you—" "What have you done?" he growled, trying to sit up, but groaning as the stitches pulled. "I did what was necessary," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You called a meeting. Of the capos, here?" He grabbed her arm, his grip weak but desperate. "You're insane. You'll be eaten alive. These men are not your friends. Cancel it. Get out of here. Take Milo and run." She didn't pull her arm away. She simply covered his hand with her own. "I already tried running. Dario," she said, her voice aching with a truth that silenced him. "I ran for 10 years. It didn't save my father. It didn't protect me. And it wouldn't have saved you." She leaned closer, her forehead touching his. "I am done running from this world. I'm done hiding. If I keep running, I will lose you, either to a bullet or to the man you have to become to keep me hidden. I won't do it. I'm choosing to stand. Right here. With you." He stared at her, seeing the iron in her spine. This was the woman who had stitched him up with a canvas needle. This was the woman who had faced down Syrah's men. This was the woman he loved. "They will not listen to you," he whispered, his fear for her overriding his pride. "They will," she said, "because you'll be sitting right next to me." At midnight, the distillery was silent, save for the hum of a generator. The main floor had been cleared. Dario sat in a large, high-backed wooden chair, a throne of sorts, a blanket over his legs, his face ashen but his eyes blazing. He looked like a wounded king, which was exactly what Elira wanted. Elira stood beside him. She had washed her face and pulled back her hair, but she still wore the blood-stained clothes. A statement. The 6 capos filed in. They were hard men, their faces etched with suspicion. They looked at Dario, their boss, wounded and weak, and they looked at Elira, the girl, the outsider, the cause of all this. "So," one of them, a man named Sal, said, his voice a gravelly rumble, "this is it. This is the woman who brought Marco Sierra's war to our door. This is the weakness that got our boss put in a chair." The air was thick with contempt. Elira stepped forward. Dario's hand tightened on the arm of his chair, but he did not speak. "My name," Elira said, her voice clear and carrying in the stone-walled room, "is Elira Dawn. You are correct. My father was William Dawn. He was your enemy. I came to this house as a ghost, hiding from men like you, and hiding from men like Marco Sierra." She paced in front of them, her gaze locking with each man's. "You call me a weakness. Marco Sierra thought I was a weakness, too. He thought he could use me to cripple Dario, to take his territory, to make you all look like fools." "And he did," Sal countered. "Look at our boss." "Do I look like a victim to you?" Elira snapped, her voice turning to steel. She held up her bloody hands. "This is Dario's blood. I stitched him back together in this barn while the men who ambushed him, your men, Syrah's men, were hunting us. I am the one who survived my father's murder. I am the one who survived Syrah's kidnapping. I am the one who called this meeting." She stopped in front of Sal. "Syrah is dead, but the men who ambushed us are not. They are his lieutenants. They think Dario is dying. They think you are scattered. They are planning to carve this city up for themselves. They think you are weak." She looked at all of them. "I am not here as a victim. I am here as the woman who survived your world's worst and still chose to be here. I am here because I love this man, and I will not let a pack of traitors tear his family apart." The capos were silent, stunned. They looked from her to Dario. Dario leaned forward, his voice a low, painful growl. "She speaks for me. She has Vascari steel. You will listen to her plan. The sting operation was Elira's design. It was simple. It was brutal. It was not about a fair fight. It was about extermination. She used the satellite phone posing as a source inside Syrah's organization and fed the location of a new safe house to the rogue lieutenants. It was a lie. The location was a Vascari-owned warehouse in the meatpacking district, a concrete box with only one entrance. Elira was in the control room, a small office overlooking the kill floor, with Gia and a recovering, grim-faced Dario. She watched the monitors as the 2 cars carrying the last of Syrah's supporters rolled into the trap. The capo's men, loyal and organized, sealed the entrance. The fight was, as Elira had promised, not a fight, It was a cleansing. It was over in less than 5 minutes. The rival threat was eliminated. Alira watched the monitors, her face impassive. She had just condemned 8 men to death. She felt no remorse, only a cold, quiet finality. The running was over. A week later, the penthouse was quiet. The city was healing. Dario was recovering, his arm in a sling, but his strength returning. The Vescari organization was stronger than ever, united with a new, quiet respect for the woman who stood beside their boss. Dario called Alira to his study. The sun was setting, painting the city in hues of orange and purple. "It's finished," he said, standing by the window. "You're safe. Milo is safe." He turned to her. His face was serious, his eyes filled with a deep, aching tenderness. "I've arranged everything. A trust, new identities for you and your brother, a house in Oregon, quiet on the coast. You can go. You can have the life my world stole from you. You can be free. You've earned it." He was offering her an escape, the one thing she had craved for a decade. She looked at him, at this powerful, broken, beautiful man who had killed for her and who she had saved. She saw the sacrifice in his eyes. He was letting her go, and it was killing him. She walked to him, reaching up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar over his eye. "And you?" she whispered. "Will you be there? In this quiet life?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I can't leave this. Alira, you know that. This is my blood. This is my name. I can't escape it." "I know," she said softly. She stood on her toes and kissed him, a soft, slow kiss. "I never wanted peace without you in it." He looked at her, confused. What are you saying?" "Peace was just survival. Dario, it was just not dying, what I have with you, here in this crazy, dangerous world. This is living." She smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not running. My home is with you." He stared at her, overwhelmed, the relief so profound it made his knees weak. He pulled her against him, his good arm crushing her to his chest. "I can't give you a normal life," he whispered into her hair. "I can't give you a white picket fence. I don't want one." "I know," he said. He pulled back slightly, reaching into his pocket. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out a heavy, intricately carved gold medallion on a thick chain. It was old. "This was my mother's," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She wore it every day. It was the only good thing my father ever gave her. It represents the family, the Vescari name, everything I am, everything I trust." He unclasped it and, with his one good hand, put it around Alira's neck. The gold was heavy and warm against her skin. "I am giving it to you," he said, his eyes locked on hers, "as a sign that you are my family. You are my trust. You are everything." He took a shaky breath. "Alira Dawn, will you be my wife?" She didn't need to speak. She pulled his face down to hers and gave him her answer, a kiss that sealed their pasts and began their future. They visited Milo the next day. He was in a bright, secure apartment, no longer a prisoner, but a guest. He was hesitant, still, but he saw the necklace on Alira's neck. He saw the way Dario looked at his sister. He saw that she was not trapped. She was anchored. "You're free, Milo," Alira told him, taking his hands. "Dario has given you the same choice he gave me. You can go, start fresh, anywhere in the world. Or you can stay, you can go to school, you can build a life here, protected, as my family, as his family." Milo looked at Dario, the man who was the son of his father's enemy, and he looked at his sister, who was finally, truly happy. "I'm tired of running," Milo said. "I'll stay. My family is here." That night, they returned to the penthouse. For the first time, it felt like home. Dario stopped her at the entrance to his bedroom, the room where she had been found. A crying, terrified maid on the floor. He looked at her, his eyes full of a love so deep it left her breathless. He was still injured, but he scooped her up into his arms, hissing slightly at the pull on his stitches. "Dario, you'll hurt yourself." "I'm fine," he said, carrying her across the threshold. He walked to the massive bed and laid her gently on the dark gray sheets, just as he had done twice before. He stood over her, a king looking at his queen. He reached down, his fingers going to the buttons of her shirt. "This time," he whispered, his voice a low, intimate promise. "I undress you because you're mine, not because you're scared." He slowly unbuttoned her shirt, his touch reverent. He was not undressing a victim. He was unwrapping his wife. The story ended as they kissed, the city lights glittering behind them. Two equals. They were not a mafia boss and a prosecutor's daughter. They were not a monster and his prey. They were just Dario and Alira, safe in love, and finally, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please drop a comment and let us know. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more. We cannot wait to hear your thoughts on Alira and Dario's journey.